Hi there, welcome to Activism is Medicine. My name is Frank Forensic, and today I would like to welcome our guest, George Tsakraklides. George is a biologist and a writer with some very insightful ideas about the planet, the human condition, and the challenges that we face at this point in history. I hope you enjoy our conversation.
All right. Well, welcome. We're very delighted to have you here. And maybe it would be helpful for our audience if you would just take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself and share a little about how you came to where you are about climate and the world and the state of things. And then we can go from there with questions and going back and forth.
That's addressed to me correctly. Gosh, that is always the worst part, the worst question. Well, what can I say? I'm George. I am an author. I write about anything that has to do with self-destruction. I take this through cognitive psychology, biology, physics, cosmology, spirituality, any sort of discipline you can imagine, because it's such a holistic polycrisis. How I've come to this is actually I have a scientific background. I've got 3 degrees in sciences, and I worked in the corporate world for a few decades. So I've kind of seen the sort of academic side, the dark side, and I've had my own personal wrestles with the what we call the capitalist society and this sort of dysfunctional and increasingly dysfunctional civilization that we live in, which puts so many pressures not only on nature but also on us. And that's actually how I came into this world of beginning to challenge this entire world, this entire system. And writing for me has been a way to, has actually been my medicine. So there you go.
Love it. Love it. That's great. So who would like to ask the first question? John, Frank?
Well, I could step in because I've been following you on Twitter for quite some time, and so I'm familiar with your work. And one idea that steps out to me is what you call the thing. And the thing, defined as necro-capitalism, has taken on a life of its own, and it seems to be running wild, independent of human control. And that we have become, rather than masters, now we become servants of that system. So does that sound like a good description of what you're into?
That is a very good description. I just earlier today, as I was writing, I like to think in metaphors many ways, and this also helps me because I can relate things to biology often, which I believe is sort of like the epitome of all the sciences, because it combines the physics with the living world, and it combines the spirit as well. Everything is biology and ecology. And I thought, I just kind of dawned on me that this beast, this thing, which for people who are not familiar with my writing, who don't know what the thing is essentially this union between, it's a sentient form of capitalism. It's capitalism gone out of control and owning us, which I guess you can say it's not a new concept. It has been owning us for quite a while, but it is now doing in a way that is even more intelligent than us, even smarter than us. It is using surveillance, algorithms, marketing that it is auto-generated by not even a human. And even the concept of capitalism and profit is actually sentient, because profit feeds itself. Profit doesn't care about human rights or about nature. It actually it doesn't even know what these things are. And this is the same for AI, which AI doesn't know what it's like to smell a flower. it just has absolutely no concept about what is love in sort of visceral, spiritual, emotional terms. Emotions, I'll remind you, are not just mind and feelings and kind of emotions are physical. They are, our hormones. So that's biology, which AI doesn't have. Anyway, long story short, I had this idea today that we are actually simply the red blood cells within this system. So we drive everything, but we have absolutely no free will. We are being routed through these arteries to feed this beast. And this is why we come to this very, very surreal place today where all the environmental activists are kind of just can't believe what's going on. Gaza and, the AMOC collapsing and just not even a word in the news. It's something that none of us expected. And why is that? It's because we've been caught in our sleep. We've been owned by this thing for actually decades, but it is accelerating because AI and what I call imperfect AI. So a lot of these things are semi-sentient. They're not fully sort of arrived at joining all the dots and joining all the systems and gaining this, what they call general AI intelligence. But we're getting there. And once we get there, we will already be in the past tense. So yeah, that's us, gentlemen. We are the four red blood cells talking to each other while the thing in the background is probably listening to us.
Right. Grinding.
You mentioned that the collapse, that many people fear a collapse, but it seems that when reading much of your work, your position is the collapse has already taken place, and we're just seeing the symptoms, which are increasingly bad. Could you maybe expand on that a bit?
Yeah, I guess when I use the term collapse a bit more broadly, so one is the ecological collapse, which has already taken place largely. We've driven species to extinction since thousands and thousands of years ago. Species that you and I can't even imagine what they look like. I mean, through, anthropology, through, different disciplines, we know, and from fossils what they look like, but there's a lot that has been lost already. So that process of that collapse, which is quite important, has been going on for thousands of years and has significantly accelerated over the last 100, 200 years since the Industrial Revolution and the expansion of the human population, which essentially, the habitat loss is, essentially taking out all those species. The second type of collapse is what I call loosely a spiritual collapse of the human being, which is us becoming less and less self-aware. And this is why we can't even bring ourselves to understand climate change. And we essentially have become what I tend to call consumatrons, which is a sort of robotic version of the consumer in the extreme form, where you don't just are not just oversaturated by consumption, you become consumption, and then in the end you actually become a product yourself. So you lose all of your intrinsic value, and you just become the value of literally the amount of carbon and water and whatever else is on your body, your thoughts and everything, and you have zero rights, which is true for every product in capitalism. Once everything has a price tag on it, it loses its rights. It loses everything. Plus, it gets an expiration date. So it dies. So it's a death cult. And we are part of this death cult. So the collapse, I guess, in terms of me not having, you know, water and electricity and all that, trust me, that will come. It's in the works. The collapse that happens before that, which creates the conditions for the actual physical collapse of the structures of civilization, that is society and politics and health services and all that stuff, that's the last bit. But the problem is that that last bit is already in the cards, because those spiritual collapses and the ecological collapses have already happened. You know, we're using 40% of the landmass of the earth for agriculture. So that ecological collapse has already happened. And now with climate change taking away acres and acres daily of arable land, you see these massive increases in food prices, which are really, really scary and which are not going to stop. So you're going to have looting and riots and all kinds of things globally very soon. And God, I hope I'm wrong, because I don't even know what that stuff's going to look like. No, none of us know what we're heading into, but it's quite scary. So to answer your question, John, yeah, my official sort of view is that we've basically set all the positions right for a collapse, the final collapse to happen, and it's kind of in the cards, unfortunately.
You know, in the client scientist world, there seem to be some arguments about whether climate change, the physical effects of that are, quote, you know, burnt in, or, you know, that the heat is at such a level that we can't reverse it. And I guess what I'm thinking is that your point is that there are also, in addition to that, there's sociological and spiritual and economic conditions that have also now become built in. And, you know, together they're, you know, moving to a point where either it'll be difficult or impossible to stop. And that leads to my next question, because what we do in activism as medicine is talk to folks to try to urge them to become active, essentially because we believe activism is helpful and it's healthy for you to get engaged. What are your thoughts about, you know, what are options that would exist for people that do have the spiritual understanding to see what's going on? What options do we have to get engaged, to get active?
It's a very interesting question, John. I'm in two minds about this. On one hand, we know that the truth will only make you stronger, and that's what activism is. It's about engaging with your fears, engaging with your dreams, engaging with what you think is impossible. You know, women believed that they have the right to vote, so they fought for it. Gays believed that they should have, you know, gay marriage, they fought for it. When everyone just thought, mate, I mean, it's never going to happen, right? So activism allows people to dream, and it also allows them to become conscious, of every living moment. And it's that can't be more healthy than that, than to be conscious and to live in every moment. This is what meditation is about. It's about living your life to the fullest and living your life with meaning. And that's what activism does. And I mean, on a personal note, that's what it gives me. Sometimes I'll just have a second thought and just be like, well, you know, what are you doing? Just kind of like writing books. I mean, and then I think, gosh, I mean, this is me being awake for another day and feeling awake and feeling amazing that I'm awake. But my second point is that, you know, because we're such a neurodivergent species, and we, you know, arguments are that we evolved that way so that we complement each other within groups. I don't think it's for everyone. And I think for some people, their whole, you know, the way that their neural system works is by never waking up, by being completely I don't know whether you want to call it stressed or power hungry or narcissistic, or they have another sort of angle in which they do life this way. So to your question of how do we engage people, is I'm not sure. I'm not sure if maybe that's too ambitious, or maybe it should kind of whatever engagement approach should target people in different ways. And it's something that, of course, has been on my mind always, also as an author who wants to approach the readers. And the reason I went into writing, and the reason I've been in Amnesty International and other organizations, was always to change people's minds. That just that has always been my kind of and I'm sure you are also, as a lawyer, to fight for what's right and make other people see what is right and what is wrong. And you do that by persuading people and using arguments and using facts and using, the truth and shining the light on things. But here's the issue, is that the light is just not strong enough for, I think, a great part of our species. So, yeah, I've actually thought about this quite a bit, and I don't know what your thoughts are regarding theories around denialism and the sort of. I'm not a neuroscientist by any stretch of the imagination, but I've developed quite a bit of thinking in terms of the possible evolutionary pathways in which we have come where we come. And it is all about the usual stuff like greed and self-preservation and only thinking about tomorrow and not our children. And we don't care about, 5 years from now. And it's
Right.
all of those things.
Right.
They're very, very prevalent. And my main sort of theory around denial, which I think I even scare myself sometimes with, that is that the fact that we do have quite a large brain, which is why we've arrived here. And I mean that both in good and bad ways. The brain, in my opinion, was kind of an evolutionary sort of leap that happened all too suddenly, and it was this what I call a exploitation logistical device, essentially, that mostly was geared towards exploiting the environment, because that's a survival skill. So that our brain logically is geared towards that, and make survival better. It's not about morals. It's not, those are happy add-ons that we added as a society because we needed that. So most of the sort of exploitation and destruction and, colonialism and slavery and thinking of people as objects and using them, that's, to me, makes a lot of sense evolutionarily. Morals don't. We've added them on later on. And the question is, how can we add more of those? And I guess if I want to finish this in a good spirit, I would say education. If everyone had an ecology course at some point early in their life, or a teacher, for crying out loud, took them by the hand when they were 5 years old and showed them, this is a flower. That's a vegetable. You eat that. And they start looking at it not as an object, right, but as a life form, as a spirit, as something that's made of the same stuff you're made of, DNA. It's actually your relative. You too, you and that vegetable, you go back 3.5 billion years to the same ancestor. Yeah. These are things that are just so basic and so important to human beings, but they're not taught in school. Why? Because everything has become the thing, and the thing only cares about profit. And this is, it's the system I mean, you've seen, you know, what Rupert Reed and Jem Bendell, they've quit academia because it's now a business.
Right.
It's a sandwich shop. That's what it is. A really expensive one and a very toxic one. I mean, you know, everything is just money, 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 and everything is to destroy more of the world, and it's all getting linked up.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah. So the thing, Marshall McLuhan said that the medium is the message, right? So that we create the thing, then the thing creates us, is what he was basically saying. We create radio, it created us as listeners, it creates TV, it creates us as visual. So now we've created this meta thing, this poly thing, and all of the downstream consequences of it. If we've created the thing, what is the message that we've created to ourselves? What are we saying to ourselves with the thing? Is it just a drama? Is it just a wound that we're expressing? Is it unconsciousness?
I'm not sure that many of us even have a voice. I personally consider the thing something that's not even, that hasn't even come from us.
Mhm.
It was sort of a side effect of civilization. Obviously, its origins are in greed, which is about survival and food and things that are biological. And that's why we invented money. And that's how things started getting very, very abstract, because money in itself is an abstraction of value. It's not real value, right? So I guess the challenge is that we can't see the thing. People don't see it because they are in it.
Yeah.
You know, we can't see this system because we're in it and we're using it all day. You know, I have to go buy food later and, you know, do all these things, and I have to somehow have some income. And it's very difficult to challenge it, and it's very difficult to see outside of it. But to me, I mean, if there's a, you know, a 1% chance of humanity surviving, and when I say surviving, I actually don't mean physically. If 1 billion humans survive, that's fine, but that, to me, they're not even going to be humans, because most humans today are not humans, really. We're just kind of work slaves. We've already kind of, that spiritual collapse is sort of ongoing. What I mean is, if we manage to reconnect with things that we used to connect, and I have quite a few people reminding me how, you know, the sort of the tribal humans were closer to that state of awareness and alertness and aliveness in the moment, which we have lost. We have oversaturated ourselves and our lives to the point where there's just no space left to think outside of that. So the thing has really filled every single corner, and it has commodified and monetized our time, our space, our labor, every tiny bit of information as well. It's gosh, it just feels like we're approaching some kind of a singularity event when everything is just going to be completely joined up, and what you will have is this sort of evil version of what I call the Earth net of things, which is all the beings on Earth and all the weather systems, and even the rocks and the gases, and everything is absolutely connected. So you will have a war. What you have today is a war between the singularity of the Earth that has been always here, which is just really about physics and chemistry, and the singularity that is materializing from the thing, which, funnily enough, actually does still have to obey physics. And this is why I always say that the thing is self-destructive. That's why I also call it semi-sentient, because it doesn't know that it's going to destroy itself. Maybe it will realize that at some point, but it's see, it doesn't care, because for the thing, death, and I know we're getting quite philosophical here, I'm sorry about that. Death doesn't exist for the thing, because the thing is technology, and it's a interconnected systems. It's not a life form, and it doesn't have value of its own personal life.
Right.
So yeah, this is the most scary thing, that we're dealing with an entity, whether you want to call it the thing or AI, that exists in completely different terms, and it has one up on us, two up on us.
Yes.
It doesn't have to deal with biological death.
Oh.
It is smarter than us, to the point that it can just really look down at us as if we're like an amoeba or a bacterium. The way you look down in your kitchen sink and you open the tap and like millions of them fall down the drain.
Mhm.
You're one of them now. So yeah, it's
Well, I have a question about your personal life. And I'm curious, do people call you a doomer? Because I know people have called Michael Dowd a doomer, and that word is used pejoratively sometimes. So do people call you a doomer? And how do you get on in so-called normal society? Do you go to Thanksgiving dinner with people? Do you go to parties? How do you talk to people who are resistant to talking about these very things?
Right.
How was it unfolding for you personally?
great question. I'm sure everyone's interested in that. I consider myself a doomer. It's a label I don't like, but as with all labels through history, you kind of adopt it and you kind of throw it back at them. And so yeah, I've proudly adopted the doomer sort of label, although I'm everyone's an individual. So first of all, what is a doomer? To me, a doomer is simply someone who's to a large extent accepted the inevitability of collapse. It's not someone who wants collapse. It's not someone who is necessarily depressed or has some kind of childhood trauma that they're dealing with, or someone who hates people, or someone who is unstable. Yeah, anyway, that's silly talking about that. But your other question was about, how do I function knowing that I'm collapse aware, as we call it in the doomosphere.
Right.
I function through activism and through my garden. Those two things.
Nice.
I have about 650 species of plants right through this window that I kind of keep in my head all day. Who needs pruning? Who needs smiling? Who needs watering? Who needs yeah, and I believe in that. People increasingly in the landscape architecture world talk about how the ecological habitats are now so damaged that if you add up all the surface area of home gardens, their total is more than that of national parks. So their potential to become conservation areas is massive.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, God, who would have thought a doomer is hoping about something? And a doomer is, this is what people don't get about doomers, is that the reason we scream and we talk about collapse is because we do want this world to change. We are, we don't like to use the H word, hope. It's a, to me, hope is the shortest path to delusion. You get all this toxic positivity,
Right.
which is just rampant everywhere. So yeah, it's my garden and it's my writing. That's what gets me out of bed.
Nice.
I have maybe perhaps more of a technical question. I've been interested lately in reading, I don't know, I'm sure you're aware of the Situationalists from back in the 60s and the Guy Debord and this crowd they had. And there's some funny videos on YouTube about how their version of capitalism affects influencers. And this is, that term that's used for people that now make a living on social media. And it strikes me that an influencer could be the ultimate form of commodification. And that, and I couldn't help but grin when you mentioned that you have an expiration date, that many influencers, or for better or for worse, are going to have an expiration date. How would you fit the influencer? Is this to you some sign of the progression of the thing? Progression either good or bad, or a demonstration that how intensely it enters us?
Yes, I don't like these influencers. I'm not going to name names, but there's tons of them who are self-professed climate activists who, you go into their Instagram and they just take all these happy shots looking like fashion models while talking about plastic pollution. Where's your sense of reality? They're creating a fake world, a fake, beautiful world in which people, oh, by the way, you can buy this sustainable, biodegradable plant pot if you click on the link below. Capitalism.
Right.
Underneath. Yep.
Yeah, no, I reject all of them completely. All I have to sell is a book. And that's because I need to eat and I want to change people. But yeah, I don't like the word influencers. I think it's got quite a negative connotation on my part because of what I described. They're creating a sort of image and it's not real. And
Right.
a lot of it is done through Instagram, isn't it?
Yeah. It is a little terrifying. And from a sense of being a doomer, there's almost I'm wondering if there's almost an existential relief once you have that level of awareness. Like, I recognize this is where I am, this is what's going on, and yet the lamb is ready, let's eat, right? That kind of a notion.
Yeah, I mean, from interactions with fellow doomers, we always say to each other, "Well, at least on the bright side, blah blah blah. You and I are not going to be shocked when it all goes down." you know, it looks like a lot of other people are just going to have a really, really big shock. And of course, the next thing you know, they will be, some of them, looking into themselves and kind of trying to realize or think as humans, you know, what does that mean about me? And what did I do wrong? What did my ancestors do wrong? Though I think that most people will still be in denial. And what I always say, which I was asked recently about, and I've actually put that in my book, I had the audacity to claim that in 3 to 5 years, climate change will be completely forgotten. And I actually think that that's likely. I think that the effects of climate change, such as fascism and war and food inflation and the social collapse, will just be so huge that this is what people are going to be talking about.
Right.
You know, they're not talking about that, you know, the Gaza war, you know, started because maybe Gaza got less funds from the rest of the world for humanitarian aid because of this economic crisis that's linked to the climate crisis. That, you know, again, it's the earth net of things, right? Everything on this planet is connected. Things that do not appear to be connected are actually connected because it's a circle. So you've got rocks and life forms, politics and ocean currents. They're all connected. I know it sounds crazy, but they are.
I think most of us would agree with you on that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we'd agree.
Yeah.
You speak of human-free zones. You had a blog about that at one point. Could you describe what you mean by that and how it fits into your overall concern about the thing?
In my perfect world, I have a dream, John. I have a dream where there are safe places for wildlife. I have a dream where there are safe places on this planet for the other 9,999,999 species that live on this planet, except for us. I mean, gosh, we talk about Gaza and we dramatize it. You know, people have nothing to eat and they're homeless. But there's, at the moment, there's millions of species on this planet that are refugees, that are going hungry, that are, you know, there's birds falling out of the sky because of the heat, you know. So yeah, my dream is human-free zones. So basically an extension of national parks, but with the added sort of rule that under no conditions can a human enter, unless it's, I don't know, staff or something that guard the park that need to go in and whatever, help in some way. Unfortunately, that would only solve, I think, 1 out of the 10 elements of overshoot. So, you know, overshoot is not just the emissions and the climate crisis, it's also the soil crisis, the oceans, the, you know, ecology, the extinction crisis. But it would actually, again, this is a dream, it would never happen, but it would solve quite a bit because you would have, you know, forests recovering, which means absorption of carbon. You would have safeguarding of the, you know, the ecological treasure that this planet has left, which is really the wealth that our civilization is based on. Yeah, I'm glad you found that. I had forgotten I wrote that. And yeah, if I was president of the world, I would definitely try to have something like that, because it would also, imagine growing up as a kid And all you've known all your life is these human free zones.
Yeah.
So you've always known that there are places where humans are not allowed.
Right.
How great would that be as an educational lesson to understand that there is a certain barrier that you don't cross because you don't, every species has its own kind of place, and we all need to respect each other as life forms. Again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier, education, ecological education. I really think just 1 hour in a child's life of an ecological education would have potentially made this world different. But now that the thing is in charge, it's kind of impenetrable, really. Kids get tablets now. Well, they get computer tablets. I was I was at a restaurant last night. I was just having a quick, I had a crepe, like a cheese and mushroom and whatever. And just right next to me, there was this family, and the couple were talking to each other. And because they didn't want to be annoyed by their kid, they just had this really loud kind of American app with, it was like singing, like, I don't know, the wheels on the bus and all this stuff in like a really heavy American accent in Greece, really loud in this shop. Obviously, because the baby can't go to sleep or it will be crying if it doesn't hear this like alien American voice of the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing.
I mean, how dystopian is that?
It's
Hollywood is everywhere.
It's the programming of the thing into, it's almost like the movie The Matrix, right? It's the programming of the thing into the children, right? The cell phones, the social media, everything else. I would note there is, or was, prior to the Ukrainian-Russian war, there was one exclusion zone around Chernobyl, which was 1,000 square miles, and wildlife had rebounded, I mean, of all kinds. They were surprised when they finally went in for just some, as you said, to take a look around, do some testing of the radiation. They found all of the species had rebounded without humans there.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned Jim Bendel, and it's been interesting that people like Jim and many of some of the folks in the UK, the movement that has come up because of him, and even like the Just Stop Oil people, Roger Hallam, many people are now, they seem to be thinking ahead in this sense that the real concern now is the possibility of fascism because of collapse.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me that ties into what you were saying, that people won't be talking about climate issues in 5 years because there will be, at least to a degree, a collapse, and there'll be other problems based on that, such as the rise of fascism. Is that consistent with what you're thinking?
I am extremely concerned. I'm extremely concerned, and I think what kind of runs through my mind is that unfortunately, throughout our history, we've shown that fascism is humanity's friend in times of crisis. It just comes in, it claims that it can solve all the problems that democracy didn't solve. And when it fails to solve those problems, it finds people to blame. And who are they? The immigrants, or any kind of other thing to blame, really. And people are so concerned about the inflation on food here in Europe that much of Europe is on the verge of turning fascism, and over the next 12 months, globally, I think there's about, is it like a 50% or 70% of the governments will turn over? It's just one of those strange years where there's, like, globally there's elections. So it's not just the US, it's just kind of like, it could just be a year where we suddenly tip into fascism in significant areas around the globe. And it's a concern I have, again, because I just think that we don't think very rationally when we are hungry, when we are in self-preservation mode, and we often try to find people to blame, and sort of like external people, and sometimes not even people that we know. So, we do this in the environmental movement as well. Very often we sort of accuse the billionaires, the Jeff Bezoses and all these billionaires. It's all their fault because these big companies are emitting 70% of the carbon. Well, who's buying their products? Who's working for them? That's us. And who is genetically the same as Jeff Bezos? Us. We've got the same greed in our DNA. They just happen to have the means to get where they got. And of course, when you get where you get, power corrupts you. So I really don't like to do that when I hear environmentalists kind of think really simplistically, well, if we just take out the billionaires and we eat the rich, we're going to be fine. That's just really naive. So human nature is, we're our worst enemy. I'm very concerned about fascism, and I'm very concerned about a fascism that will be a new breed. It will be one where we won't be told to shut up. We won't be intimidated. You know why? Because we will not revolt, and we will not even know that something is wrong, because that's how brainwashed we'll be.
Yeah.
And we see that today. No one is talking about climate change when they see images of rivers drying up in the middle of Europe. Why? Because the media is not talking about it, because the media is owned by the thing. Okay. Why? Because everyone's, brainwashed about this kind of toxic positivity at work. Everyone's, now, all these people working remotely. And this is what I really struggled with, because in my previous corporate job, I was told that I needed to smile more in the Zoom meetings. And I'm just completely anti-smile now. I would smile if I feel like it. And if I don't feel like it, I won't smile. And it doesn't mean that I'm not happy. It just means that I don't want to put on a fake smile. If you tell me a good joke, I'll laugh. I laugh my ass out,
Right.
Yeah.
I had another question about indigenous philosophies. I'm kind of a romantic, and one of my sort of last, straw that I'm grasping at is like, what if we were to adopt indigenous philosophies on a wide scale? Would that make a difference? Are indigenous people really more earth friendly? Is it all humanity to blame, or is it a certain kind of culture that's the issue here? And maybe indigenous philosophy, that's the way forward. So what's your take on that?
I think that indigenous peoples were much, much closer to where we should be. They were aware of, if they cut down that tree, they're not going to have fruit next year. Why? Because they lived right next to that tree. They weren't living in front of a computer screen. However, the asterisk here is that indigenous people who are genetically the same as us didn't have our tools of destruction. If you had given them guns, if you had given them bulldozers, they would have taken down that tree and replaced it with soy or whatever. It would have happened.
Right.
So they're not off the hook for me, the indigenous people. And I don't like when people just kind of say, oh, but that's not us. Look at how we were. La, 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 la. But yes and no. I think we absolutely should go back to those philosophies. And I'm always taken aback by some of the things that Indian chiefs have said here in the States, as their tribes were kind of declining, and they could see their own collapse in so many ways. And they just, some of the things that come out of their mouths are just like so very much Roger Hallam, and like just like even more, and just absolutely beautiful. The way that you can tell that they understand the circularity. When you hurt nature, you've hurt yourself.
Right.
They knew it. They knew it.
J-Lo?
Yeah, I'm wondering, you really, I read a number of your books and a lot of your articles and have enjoyed them very much and always stimulated and learned something new. And the thing that it's almost like the thing is the Moloch. The thing is the golem. It's the unconscious giant beast that's just, we've set in motion and now we can't outrun it, and it's going to run until it runs its course. And by running its course, what does that mean? Right. And what awareness do we need to have in order to stay reasonably sane? And you've done a good job, although you're a little crazy, and I like that. It's like it's appreciated. I don't think you could have your perspectives if you were inside of it without being able to step outside. So I'm curious, from your standpoint, what would you call the key awarenesses that we need to have to become more aware of the thing, and at least, I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going with that, except to say that it haunts me.
Yeah. I think it's not a flip of a switch. It's a process, because we are living in the thing. We are linked to it in more than one ways in our daily life. We depend on it. And it's not, going off grid, going off thing is not really an option, at least on a personal, level as well. But you can put yourself in places where you can begin to see yourself within the thing. It's almost like the movie The Matrix, really, where you're still in it, but all of a sudden you can actually see all the ugliness, and you can see the truth, and you can see where you are. And, for me, I guess, my gardening, sometimes just engaging with nature and realizing the complexity, and realizing that I'm also changing as a person, where, for example, when I started gardening, I was focusing on plants. I didn't have a thing ever about insects. Now I realize that, oh my God, the insects are in the picture as well. And they help the plants, and the plants help the insects too. And so it's this checking out of the thing as much as you can, whether it is a garden or another experience which is outside of the thing, in longer and longer breaks, that eventually, I guess, I'm not a therapist, but it's a positive habit, a muscle that you train to be able to go outside of the thing for long enough periods without needing your consumer sort of gifts, without needing your toxic habits, without even needing other people to banter with, and being able to simply breathe and understand that you're just one of these 10 million species. And then all of a sudden, the thing becomes visible because you realize that it is a very much artificial and technological construct that has been created by just one of these species. And in that sense, it's just really tiny compared to the vastness, what I call the vastness. This is a new word that I use. I mean, obviously we know what the vastness means, but the way that I use it is to me, the vastness is this grand space that opens up when we are able to see ourselves outside of our civilization and outside of our needs and our greeds and our kind of tiny problems that everyone's just getting so stressed up about, when really all you need is some food on your plate and someone to love you. That's really all you need as a human.
Right.
So the vastness is all the possibilities and the happiness that opens up when you're able to leave all those technological things behind. And I'm not anti-technology, but I'm anti being oversaturated by technology and becoming a slave to technology, which all of us are, and working for the thing as a wage slave, essentially. And I guess I could have accepted that maybe if I wasn't destroying the environment every time that I have a job in the thing. So yeah, to me, it's a practice and it's a process, and it's about finding those opportunities on those ways to check out of literally the matrix, and be able to look back into the thing. And also, I guess following the more recent approaches in psychology, which is looking holistically into the body, not as a mind and body, but as a psychosomatic experience, which is what you are, to realize what it feels like in your body when you are outside the thing. That's really important, because then you realize that you feel more whole, you feel more authentic, you feel that time goes by a lot slower and it's a lot more enjoyable.
Right.
Yeah. Does that make any sense?
Getting
I know
back to
I
the
haven't actually
humanity,
thought
right?
about it. It's a really good question. It's something to think about when we talk about activism. Really, how do we get people to check out of the matrix for 2 hours and then tell us, how was that? Did you like that? That's actually what you're supposed to be like as a human.
Exactly.
Nice. Well, there's one question, we're running out of time, but one question we ask a lot of our guests is, do you ever work with young people? And if you do, what kind of message do you want to leave to young people?
I've taught. I taught for 4 years as part of my graduate assistantship when I was in university. So I don't really work with young people, but I think that young people have so many challenges today, and the thing is completely consuming them. And you see this in its physical manifestations with, from eating disorders to stress to, they're coming down with diseases that we used to come down at our 50s and 60s. It's really, really terrifying. And it's yet another sign of the collapse that we are entering. It's very, very sad. And I've had that in my circle as well. If I were to give some advice to the young people is don't be like us and learn from our history, learn from our mistakes,
Yeah.
and revolt against this system. Because you know what, you're going to be in it for longer as it gets worse. We're going to pass away, and you're going to be left with a terrifying reality that you have your parents to blame for.
Yes.
I honestly, I don't even know what to tell a teenager today in terms of, I had someone ask me the other day, a very, very difficult question. And I'm not sure I gave them a very optimistic answer. The question was, if I study biology, do you think I can, help this world with the challenges that the civilization is facing? Or do you think I'm just going to end up being stuck in some kind of job that really just has no ethics? And I said that that's what happened to me. And so many people, so many times that I read people's CVs, and they've studied, environmental engineering or environmental this, environmental that, and they end up becoming a high-paid consultant, which is what I was in marketing, of all things, which is just the work of the devil. The challenge that humans have, again, is really using their intelligence for good things. We can use our intelligence for so many bad things. So that there's hope, I guess, there. If we were to use a fraction of that intelligence for good things, God, what we could achieve is just tremendous.
Beautiful.
Yeah. It's very interesting that you use the word practice when you were describing what needs to happen. It's a process, but it's an effort. People have to make the effort. That would be a great class, said Frank. How to check out of the thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Different strategies, especially for young people.
Yeah.
It would be fascinating. I'd love to get involved.
Be a very interesting seminar, so to speak.
Form a band called Rage Against the Thing.
Oh, I love it.
Well, another question we typically ask people, as kind of a wrap up, is what are your short-term plans? Where are you headed in the next year or two? And what kind of projects are you working on, besides your garden and that kind of thing? Is there more writing projects for you, or speaking, or?
In terms of personal life, I'm actually taking a year off, or which could go on indefinitely. I've decided to check out of the thing. It almost brought me to my knees after 18 years in the business I was in. So it's been a very, very interesting experience, and it's been, I guess, very positive in many ways. It's in some ways responsible for the book that I wrote. And I'm also working on a new book. And every time I write a book, it's just so exhausting. Physically, mentally, it's really, really intense, especially writing about terrifying things. But yeah, every time I say that's the last book, I then got another one in the back. So yeah, watch out for that one.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we really want to thank you for coming on today. This has been really interesting. And
this is really interesting my end as well. I appreciate it. Yeah, I really liked it.
Good.
Maybe sometime down the road we can check in again and see where the four of us are at, and and what's going on, but
I hope you've enjoyed our conversation today. If you'd like to know more about Activism is Medicine, you can visit our website, activismismedicine.net, and there you'll find our previous conversations with our other guests, and we look forward to seeing you again sometime soon.